Director of the Lang Center for Civic. Hi, this is Ben Berger. I'm Associate Professor of Political Science at Swarthmore College and Executive Director of the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. Thank you so much for joining us on this final day of the Engaged Scholarship Consortium. Before I turn things over to our capable moderator, Aurora Winslade, who is the Director of Sustainability at Swarthmore, I want to lift up just a couple of community partnerships that we have really relied upon, and I hope that you either know about already or might become part of soon. The first one is the Engagement Scholarship Consortium, or ESC. It's a consortium of public universities and research universities, as well as smaller regional universities and colleges, and even small liberal arts colleges like Swarthmore College. They do terrific work to improve university, college, and community relationships and to increase community capacity. They've got 2 journals that you can publish in, submit things for publishing. I encourage you to check out their upcoming conference. It's an annual conference, would have been in Philadelphia this year in September. Instead, it's going to be virtual, but that means anybody can attend without, even traveling. It's still hosted by schools, though, in the Pennsylvania region, hosted by Penn State, along with Dickinson, James Madison, University of Delaware, Virginia Polytechnic, West Virginia University, and Swarthmore College. And in fact, faculty members and community partners can submit panel presentations like the ones we've been putting on this week, and students can submit poster proposals. I encourage you to do that. And that's through March 26th. We'll have a link in the chat function that you can check that out. Anyway, it's a great organization. They've got 2 journals. I encourage you to look at it. And the second one is Campus Compact, which everybody probably knows about. They do fantastic work. But they have a 1-year-old initiative, the Engaged Scholars Initiative, ESI. And I encourage you to check that out. That aims to support young and developing staff and faculty members who are doing the kinds of engaged scholarship projects that we've seen this week and will continue to see today. So Campus Compact is the kind of bulwark of it. Last year, Brown University's outstanding Swearer Center was the thought partner and leader alongside Campus Compact. This year, it's us, the Lang Center at Swarthmore College. And you can nominate, self-nominate, or nominate somebody else. The deadline is coming up soon. We'll put the information again in the chat section, but it's a year-long cohort that gives support and mentoring and network building to young scholars and staff members doing this kind of engaged scholarship work. I encourage you to check it out. Campus Compact is fantastic. And lastly, I want to thank the Lang Center staffers who made this all possible, who worked so hard on this symposium, and in fact worked like the staff members at all of these partner institutions arduously since the pandemic to keep things going, to keep the flow of resources, information, and other resources going between us and our community partners. Nimesh Gamier, class of 15 from Swarthmore, did a phenomenal job with this. So did Dr. Katie Price, our associate director. And we've also had fabulous support from Ashley Henry, our program manager, Dr. Jennifer McGee, our senior associate director, Dolores Robinson, who is the heart and soul of the Lang Center, Ala Shafee, who is our civic engagement fellow. They've all been just terrific. I appreciate the schools that have joined us. It's an inspiration for us at the Lang Center to be alongside such great partners, and we hope to do this many times into the future. Thanks again for joining, and now I want to turn it over to Aurora Winslade in the Sustainability Office at Swarthmore. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. It's my pleasure and honor to serve as moderator for this session. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Swarthmore College is on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape, whose homeland includes Delaware, New Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, and Southern New York. To recognize this legacy of the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the Indigenous people who've been living and working here from time immemorial. For over 10,000 years, the Lenni Lenape have been the caretakers of these lands and of the river of human beings, more commonly known as the Delaware River. The Lenape were the first tribe to sign a treaty with the United States and the first tribe to have land set aside for them in New Jersey. During the 18th century, the Lenni Lenape were systematically displaced, and thousands of Lenape people were forced off their land through violence and deception. By the 1860s, the United States government sent most Lenni Lenape people to present-day Oklahoma under the Indian Removal Act. A large number of Lenape families, though, still remain in the area and continue the traditions of their ancestors. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense, and any acknowledgement by itself is a small gesture. It becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic relationships and informed action. Swarthmore College does not currently have an official land acknowledgement, but President Val Smith recently announced that a task force would be convened to begin this important work. And for the past few years, the Environmental Studies Department and the Office of Sustainability have been working in partnership to deepen relationships with local Lenni Lenape tribal members. Given that our theme today is environmental justice, and since Swarthmore College is the host institution, I'd also like to share with you our campus-wide draft climate crisis strategy statement that was developed in partnership with many dozens of campus community members over the 2018-19 academic year, approved by President Valerie Smith and shared with our Board of Managers. It reflects the college's commitment to prioritize justice in our work, to figure out how the college responds to the urgency of climate change within the context of our mission. I'll let the commitment speak for itself, and I'm happy to discuss it further. If anyone would like to contact me afterwards, please feel free to reach out. It represents the overarching strategy that guides the college's work in trying to live into our values and our vision for the radical societal transformation that we know is necessary to solve the climate crisis. Now, about our format today. Audience members are welcome to submit questions via the Q&A box. Panelists will have 15 minutes for their presentation, followed by a 5-minute discussion and Q&A after each presentation, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions with all the panelists. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our first presenters from Duke University, my alma mater, Catherine Castleman and Elizabeth Shapiro Garza. Welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks so much, Aurora, and thanks to everyone for having us. I'm just going to share my screen and then hand it over to Dr. Shapiro Garza.
Hi, I also welcome you all, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great honor, and I really look forward to learning from the other panelists and from the questions that I'm sure will be rich and engaging, and the conversations that will ensue from those. So we'll be talking today, though, about engaging with North Carolina communities to address environmental health disparities, and especially with a focus on the challenges and opportunities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Advance. So to provide our own land acknowledgement, and also just in recognition that Duke University does not have a formal land acknowledgement either, but the land that our center and our greater university occupies are the ancestral lands of the Shakura and Edo and Tuscarora peoples. Today, North Carolina recognizes 8 tribes: the Kohari, Lumbee, Meherrin, Occaneechi, Saponi, Halawi, Saponi, and the Wakama, Sioux, Saponi, and the eastern band of the Cherokee. We recognize those peoples for whom they were ancestral lands. These were ancestral lands, as well as the many indigenous people who live and work in the region today. And I will also say that one of the issues that we're facing in North Carolina, our indigenous communities in North Carolina are facing, is a lack of federal recognition of their land and their land rights. Advance. So we are coming to you today from the Duke University Superfund Research Center. Catherine and I represent the community and what is called the community engagement core of that center. I'll provide a bit of information. I think that's important background information on our mandate and the way in which we are our mandate to engage with communities that are impacted by chemical contaminants in the environment, and how that influences the way that we can conceive of, discuss environmental justice in that framing of our work. The Duke University Superfund Center is formed by researchers from across the Duke campus who are focused on issues of environmental health and ecotoxicology. So looking at and understanding how chemical contaminants impact the environment and the health of the people who are living in and with that environment. We are funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. They are our sole funder. And the mandate of a federal agency, the mandate of our community engagement core is to build trust and bi-directional communication between the researchers who are conducting both applied and basic research on environmental health impacts of chemical contaminants and the communities who are impacted by those same chemical contaminants. And we have a focus on early life toxic exposures that may have later life health consequences. So that's our mandate, is really to, when we talk about bidirectional communication, what that means to the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences is that the research that's being conducted at our center be informed by the needs of the communities in North Carolina and our region that are being impacted by chemical contaminants, and also that we are able to translate that research in ways, and the findings of that research in ways that are going to support and help to improve the health of people in North Carolina who are impacted by the issues that we're studying. Next slide. So the framework that we work under, because we are, again, working our sole funder is the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. So the way that we have to frame and think about the work that we're doing and the community engagement that we're doing is through the lens of environmental health disparities. The definition that the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences provides for this is environmental health disparities exist when communities are exposed to a combination of poor environmental quality and social inequities, have more sickness and disease than wealthier, less polluted communities. And I think when we're talking about this in the context of environmental justice, one thing that we are can get tricky for us to talk about is the justice component of environmental justice. So we can certainly focus on, and we do focus on communities that are disproportionately or disparately impacted by the effects of chemical contaminants in their environment. But we are not, according to our mandate, allowed to do advocacy work. And so that does limit our ability to, we can support communities who are doing advocacy work, and we can certainly provide research and engagement that supports their advocacy work, but we can't do it ourselves. Next slide. So in that context, we are going to be talking about one of the projects that we have been working on with supporting communities that are advocating for environmental justice in their own communities in North Carolina. But to provide some broader context about the situation for environmental health disparities and environmental injustice in North Carolina. Warren County, which is in the central north part of our state, is credited as being one of the birthplaces of the environmental justice movement in the United States in particular. This was happening in well, actually it was happening earlier than this, but in the 1980s, there was widespread dumping of PCBs in that community, and the community organized to a magnificent extent and worked to fight against the dumping of those chemical contaminants in their environment very successfully. But we are still, of course, facing widespread environmental injustice throughout the state of North Carolina. One, I think, very under-recognized environmental justice issue that is becoming more and more prevalent is the wood pellet industry, which has grown up largely as the result of controls on carbon emissions in Europe, strangely. One of the things that was exempt from the regulation of carbon emissions in Europe was the use of wood pellets to fuel energy production. A lot of those wood pellet production is actually happening in the United States and being shipped over to Europe. And there's really widespread environmental contamination, primarily from air pollution, but in other sources as well as deforestation happening in the southeastern United States as a result. We are also facing significant issues with contained animal feedlots, primarily from hog and chicken production, and most recently, or not most recently, but the publicity around it has been most recent. The production of PFAS and PFOA compounds, they're known as forever compounds, compounds that are used in the production of Teflon and in many other products, and they don't ever degrade. have been found to be being released in areas in the southeastern part of our state, and there's widespread, unfortunately, have been found widespread in water sources as well as in air. And of course, to note, and as I'll show you in another couple of maps, the impacts of these environmental contaminating industries are largely being impacted or are being felt in communities of color and indigenous communities. Next slide. This is just to show, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but to kind of show especially when we're talking about environmental health disparities. One thing to note is the underlying health conditions of the communities we're working with. And the pattern that I'd like you to notice here is really just that the darker blue represents lower indices of health. This is coming from County Health Rankings and Roadmaps of the 2020 report. And to notice that in the eastern part of the state is really where we see much lower indices of health. Next slide. And I apologize, this map appears to be a bit blurry, but the basic point to take away is that this is also a map of where we see an overlap of where industrial hog operations are operating in our state. They are horribly polluting in a lot of ways, and there are a lot of environmental health impacts from being anywhere near a contained animal feedlot where you have either poultry or hog production. But just showing the overlap between where the concentration of enslaved populations in 1860 were and where there is still a high concentration of the African American or Black population in our state is in the same places where these industrial hog operations are occurring. And again, a strong overlap where we see very low indices of health as well. Next slide. And this is, again, a bit hard to see because it really does represent wood pellet plants and wood pellet production in the entire southeastern United States. But you will also note that there is a very strong concentration of these wood pellet plants in the eastern part of our state. Next slide. So I'll move on to talk generally about the model for community engagement that we employ at the community engagement core of the Duke University Superfund Center. And our model is really based on, I think it will be recognized by anyone who does any kind of community engagement. So this is certainly not unique to us. But it is based on a participatory action research framework, which really does focus on a co-production of knowledge on questions that are relevant to the communities that we're working with. So our first step is to define community relevant questions, and then to move on to understand the existing institutional landscape. So understanding which organizations or individuals within a community are already doing are interested in and are working on the issues that we are able to promote. In our cases, the issues of health impacts from chemical contaminants in the environment, where there may be overlap, and instead of trying to reintroduce or to produce a new wheel or to perhaps counter work that's already being done, we partner with existing institutions within that we may be able to have some overlap in interests and in efforts within communities that we're working with. We conduct participatory research. We work with the community partners to translate our findings into action. We synthesize generalizable lessons learned and replicate and disseminate, and then start the wash cycle again and see what we can produce. And I'm going to let Catherine take it from here. She'll be talking about an application of this model in one particular project.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to quickly run us through an example from our work with subsistence fish consumers, people who are catching and eating fish from the Cape Fear River near the Wilmington, North Carolina area. So we won't have much time to go through this, but we're always happy to connect and talk more with people if they're interested in our work. So just to start with the first part, defining the community relevant questions. This project really began from a grassroots effort to stop a cement plant from moving into an already impaired part of the Cape Fear River, which would have created even more mercury contamination. And you can see some of the partners who are involved in the Stop Titan effort here, the New Hanover County NAACP, New Hanover County Health Department, and Cape Fear River Watch, which is a nonprofit. And they, in the process of organizing for this effort, noticed people fishing from banks and off of highways and started to wonder whether people were being exposed to toxic chemicals in those fish. So they got together, applied for an EPA Environmental Justice Collaborative Problem Solving Grant to understand more about what people were catching and eating and whether this might pose health concerns to the local community, and to try to make some change. So you can see from these maps, the area we're talking about correspond with the maps that Dr. Shapiro Garza just showed you. We really check in a lot with our community advisors, and just speaking of changes during the pandemic, we have relied really heavily on these strong relationships with our community advisors and partners who are kind of our ears and eyes on the ground. And last summer, we also started developing a relationship between UNC, NC State, and Duke, and our community engagement specialists across the universities to share lessons learned, best practices for adapting to the pandemic. So this was another way we were really trying to capitalize on the existing relationships we had to pivot during this time of a lot of change and uncertainty. We conducted participatory research with this EPA Environmental Justice Collaborative Problem Solving Group. The CEC was sort of brought in as a facilitator and to help with the research process and to develop materials and train community health educators to share the messages from the results of the research. So we went back with the group and tried to find out from people who were fishing on the banks and through household surveys which species people were most often catching and eating, and how they were sharing and communicating about this topic. So to meet the community need and request, the CEC applied for and received a grant in 2020 to conduct some fish tissue sampling in the Cape Fear. So one way we've had to adapt over the course of the last year is to really rely on partners, external labs in Wilmington, and the Division of Marine Fisheries and Wildlife Resources Commission especially were partners to help us catch these fish that needed to be analyzed. So really, relying heavily on those partnerships, especially when you can't be there in person to sort of conduct this research. We developed from these results a social marketing campaign. And for those of you who aren't familiar with social marketing, it's basically a way of using traditional marketing principles for a social good. So in this case, trying to help subsistence fish consumers reduce their exposure to chemicals that might be in fish in the Cape Fear, specifically mercury in this case. And we trained the data collectors who had helped with the survey, who were locally recruited, to become health educators in the community, and pass out materials at events. And one of the adaptations we had to make this year was in the process of iteratively revising this social marketing campaign. We normally hold community meetings and focus groups to get feedback and hear how things are going and try to adapt our strategies and approaches. So we had to move that to a virtual setting this year. And this seemed to work fairly well. We did, it's always hard to get people to spend more time on a computer these days. We had to provide some digital gift cards and incentives. But we also adapted by realizing that people were using social media so much more that we converted our campaign into a social media toolkit that people could share widely. And also, we really knew that this was a time when a lot of people would be depending on fish from the river as a source of food, in particular because of the economic hardships of the pandemic. So we wanted to make sure we were continuing to share this information and help people understand fish consumption advisories. So then the final part of our model is to do basically what we're doing here today, to share the lessons we've learned with others and try to replicate and disseminate them. So specifically, we really wanted to make sure that the results of this community-based research made it to the level of policy change and inform fish consumption advisories at the state and local level. So in part because we were spending less time in the field last year during the summer and fall of 2020, we have been able to focus on starting this cycle again and applying for funding to do more policy work. And we had some questions that came out of our work with the community. Basically, the fish consumption advisories that exist seem to be based on some sort of limited out of date data about fish tissue. And so we continue to apply for further sources of funding to do Cape Fear testing of fish from the Cape Fear. And we've also been planning to do some additional work based on the North Carolina Fish Forum that we organized back in 2019 that brought together the North Carolina Department of Health, and which actually sets the fish consumption advisories, and wildlife resources agents, as well as other stakeholders in the advisory setting and communication process, to really try to improve the data management of this information and continue to involve impacted communities in the process of setting fish consumption advisories so that they are more relevant and locally specific. So this is just back to the full model again. I wanted to say here that we do think this is a replicable model, especially for groups like ours that are receiving sort of the longer term funding sources from federal sources, but it does require time. And I think that's something that makes this challenging, is to actually build the relationships, conduct the research, and synthesize and share the findings is a process that does take definitely a few years or more. So, we realize that there are some limitations and challenges for groups that may be operating on shorter timeframes or with limited resources. And so we're always working to try to adapt this so that it can be used by more groups. And I won't go over this slide, but this is just a recap of some of the challenges and innovations and opportunities that we had and adaptations we had to make over the last year. And thank you very much. This is our website, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and for all the great work that you're doing. So I want to encourage all of our participants, you can put any questions that you have in the Q&A box. You'll see it as an option, and feel free to put any questions that you have there. And to start us off, you went really quickly. That's an amazing presentation, so thank you. You went really quickly through that slide that shared challenges, and I'd love it if you could just kind of talk us through what are some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered, and how have you overcome some of those challenges?
Right. Well, I think the one that's closest top of mind for me is really trying to organize field work during a pandemic, getting people together to understand the goals of a community-based research project when you're all remote, sometimes haven't even met the people in person who are helping with the project. In this case, really asking to build off of the existing work of other partners in order to collect fish tissue data and get the results back out to the people who need to hear it. So for me, that was one of the biggest challenges and adaptations that we had to make. I don't know if Liz has others she'd like to add.
No, I think that one of the things that I can certainly see as a challenge in all of the community engagement work that I do right now is that people are stressed to a degree that it is really hard to know what more we can ask of them. If aside from just supporting them in making sure that they're not evicted, in supporting them in ways that as they're facing health and economic hardship. So I think that it's also recognizing that the issues that we are focusing on and that we have to focus on as a Superfund Center may be lower priority for people at this point. and respecting that and supporting them in any other ways that we can. So that's certainly a broader challenge.
Thanks. And a question that's come in from the audience: does the Institute provide compensation or incentives for community partners?
So I'll just briefly say that the data collectors that I mentioned from the EPA Environmental Justice Collaborative Problem Solving Grant, which was funded not by our grant, but by the EPA, were compensated for their time and mileage and the work that they did as community data collectors and community health educators. And that is something we strive to do when we are partnering with other groups, is to compensate them fairly for their time and to make sure there are incentives for participating in focus groups and other research activities. But Liz, anything to add there?
No, I will just say that can be challenging though too, both in terms of using federal funds to support stipends and honoraria. There's all sorts of restrictions on that. So I will say, yes, we do very much focus on that, but I'll also just acknowledge that there are a lot of challenges to doing so. Actually, Duke, our own institution, puts up quite a few barriers to being able to do that as well. So, but again, we do have a strong focus on that ourselves.
Thank you. I know it's a question that comes up a lot, so thanks for that. We are going to move on to our next presenters, but there'll be more time at the end if you have more questions that you didn't get a chance to answer. So thank you so much for that. So our next presenter is from Miami-Dade College, and we're really glad to hear from Michael Matthews. Over to you.
Hello, thank you. Honored to be here today, and thank you for the invitation to participate in the symposium. I'm going to share my screen real quick. You should all be able to see that. So today I would like to talk about our campus learning community model, which is a model that we've developed over the past few years at Miami-Dade College that allows transdisciplinary exploration of different topics related to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and beyond. So just a little bit of, I guess, place setting. Miami-Dade College is a democracy's college, and we're really about having access for students. We embrace economic, cultural, and civic leadership. And we're really large with 8 campuses, which I'm mentioning because maybe it kind of informs a little bit of the challenges that we have in creating this, this campus learning community model. A little bit about Earth Ethics Institute. I am the director of Earth Ethics Institute, and basically our mission is to foster Earth literacy at the college and beyond. And Earth literacy is really about our connection to Earth and to nature, and how that works on many different levels, from the natural and physical sciences, ecology, biology, geology, through more of the cultural aspects, and even to the personal aspects of how on a personal level we might relate to Earth and to nature. And so that really informs all of the work that we do at Miami-Dade College through working with both faculty and students here at the college. So this is our land acknowledgement statement. This is something that we wrote at Earth Ethics Institute with input from a representative from our local Miccosukee tribe. And so at Miami-Dade College, we acknowledge the indigenous peoples on whose land we stand, the Miccosukee and the Seminole tribes who remain unconquered, and the Tequesta tribe who first occupied the land that is now downtown Miami, and so represent ties to both our prehistoric and historic past. Miami-Dade College is grateful for the unique knowledge and ways of being, as well as the profound connection to our South Florida ecosystems that these indigenous tribes represent. we look forward to strengthening our relationship with both Miami's indigenous people as well as the natural world. So again, that's not the official college land acknowledgement statement, but we're finding that it's actually being used more and more. So hopefully some version of this may become our official college statement, but it is what we're using for now. As far as environmental justice goes, one, again, to just kind of give you an idea of the setting, here in Miami, one environmental justice challenge that we have is climate gentrification, where we're already experiencing sea level rise because of climate change here in Miami. And you can see in the map that I showed that based on 3 feet of sea level rise, a lot of our coastal areas and barrier islands like Miami Beach will largely be underwater. And so what's happening is there's gentrification where what is largely African-American communities are being gentrified as more and more people are moving into these high-lying communities, which are already disrupted. Let me see if I can get the laser pointer here. So we're looking at the area along I-95, and so this area through here is really drastically changing, and there's a lot of issues related to that with people being displaced from their homes because of development and rising costs and other issues. So a little bit about the campus learning community, which is really what this discussion is about. So this is, the basic idea is that we work with faculty and identify a different topic or a theme that is then integrated into their classes throughout the term or throughout the year, as the case may be. And so we find that this is a great model in that it really is a great infrastructure for transdisciplinary collaboration at the college. So we can have science, English, art, music, whatever they're teaching, identify with the topic and come together in exploring this topic. It's also a great framework for promoting high impact pedagogies. So things like project-based learning, academic service learning, which is beyond just volunteering, but actually having like the whole experiential process and having things like reflection and really tying it to the curricula. Education for sustainability. I was telling you a little bit about earth literacy and more. So we find that this model is a great framework for integrating these different learning modalities. And as well as we have a whole new focus on change making. We're an Ashoka U change making university. And so this also is a great format for including change making education. So kind of the backstory is this began at our Padron, Eduardo J. Padron campus, named after our former college president, which was formerly the Inter-American campus. And when I was working there, I was working with faculty, and we developed this model. It was originally the faculty learning community at the time and has kind of evolved into what we call the campus learning community, which is now actually maybe growing beyond just being campus, and hopefully will eventually become more of a college learning community. And we're actually finding that that's happening. The current year, the 2021 iteration of this has really kind of grown beyond Padron campus. We had started working with our North campus, which is in North Miami. And now, and currently, we'll have not only North and Padron campuses, but West Campus, Kendall campus, and our medical campus. And with our symposium featuring guest speakers from University of Miami, Florida International University, and even University of Wyoming. I just wanted to give a quick recognition or shout out to 2 of my colleagues at Padron campus who really have helped us to develop, Professor Miriam Francis Abedi, who teaches psychology, and Professor Renee Revolta, who teaches environmental science. And this kind of grew out of Professor Abetti's interest in doing adaptive learning communities. And it also, I think, illustrates the importance of professional development for faculty. Professor Revolta had the opportunity to attend a Censor conference, which is a whole nother organization, Censor Science Education for New Civic Engagements and Responsibilities. They look at basically including civic engagement into STEM classes. And he went to one of their conferences and came back so fired up that he was really inspired to start this whole, at the time, faculty learning community. So a little bit again about how this works. So we identify a topic or a theme, and I'll run through some of the different themes that we've looked at. More recently, usually it tends to be a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Definitely faculty are kind of involved in the decision of what we'll be exploring, as well as staff from Earth Ethics Institute and the Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy, who are kind of the college's academic service learning department, if you will. And then the idea is that this theme is incorporated throughout the term or the year into the faculty's curricula. And so as they're teaching, maybe they might have some kind of a project based on the theme or a service learning opportunity. You know, again, these high impact pedagogies that I mentioned. And then this culminates in a symposium towards the end of the term. And in this symposium, we'll feature student project presentations. So maybe they've done posters or a PowerPoint or a video or things like that. We'll have guest speakers, film screenings, and other special events and activities. Oops, sorry about that. So just kind of to run you through some of the different things that we've explored. The first learning community that we did in fall 2015, we called Aliens Among Us. And we kind of took this sci-fi approach of looking at the idea of alien life. And what does that mean to us in terms of sustainability, or even just kind of the concept of being alienated. And so this allowed a lot of room for interpretation, which is kind of important in this type of framework. And so we were able to even look at things like, what if an alien were to come to Earth and saw how we live? What would they think of that? In spring 2016, we looked at Black Lives Matter and had a lot of different people from the community come in and talk about their experience. And this also connected to different environmental justice issues, equity issues as well. So this connected to quite a few UN SDGs, as well as environmental justice issues as one of the subcategories, if you will. In fall 2016, we looked at identity and adjustment across the disciplines, so kind of looking at this idea of identity and how does that connect to resilience and sustainability. In spring 2017, we looked at recycling and all the different forms of recycling, from household recycling to more industrial recycling, batteries, electronic recycling. In fall 2017, we had kind of a dual theme where we looked at vulnerability and resilience and the connection between those two. But at the same time, the kind of the topic of fake news was becoming really prevalent. And so we were also looking at photoreversy as well. In spring 2018, we wanted to look at sense of place. And at this point, this was still more of a campus-specific community. The Padron campus is in our Little Havana neighborhood in Miami, which is a historically Cuban-American community that itself is going through gentrification and other issues. You can see from the picture, downtown Miami looming in the distance of this neighborhood that's in danger of kind of losing its unique identity. And so we kind of explored this idea of sustainability and resilience in our local neighborhood. In fall 2018, we looked at war, the topic of war, but different interpretations of war. So it could be, looking at the actual impact of war or what that means to our combat veterans, all the way through different interpretations of like the war on the environment, the war on climate, things like that. So that allowed a lot of rich conversation. And if you're going to do war, of course, you have to do peace afterwards. So in spring 2019, we looked at peace, justice, and strong institutions. And by the time we started getting into 2019, we had grown the campus learning community to our North Campus and had really started focusing on the SDGs. In this case, we were looking at number 2 of zero hunger. So that was our theme, and we decided at this point to make it more of an annual or academic year theme instead of just looking at one term. So there was more room for inclusion into the curricula and maybe a deeper, more robust exploration of the topic. And I guess I should mention, going back to this slide, that we got into spring 2020, of course, there was that kind of the whole campus learning community got derailed because of the pandemic that term. But we have come back, and so this academic year, we're looking at the theme of sustainable cities, which is really based on SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. And at this point now, as an adaptation to the pandemic, we've really kind of switched to a virtual format. And so we've started really exploring using things like Blackboard, Collaborate Ultra, MS Teams, Zooms, even Google Meet. We started really looking at using LibGuides or library guides. And so we're working more with our learning resources department. And we have resources online connecting to the topic. And we're actually preparing for our spring term symposium. Will be happening April 5th through the 9th. And the LibGuide will be our landing page with links to all the different talks and events, as well as additional content and resources. So there's been some pros and cons to this. We're finding that advantages to the virtual environment are that people don't have to commute, which is great. If we're trying to have things happening at different campuses, it's nice not to have to drive across town. And in Miami, just a drive across town might be an hour or more, depending on the time of day and traffic. Things like the chat tool and a lot of the platforms are really nice and kind of add to the discussion. And we're finding that we're able to have an audience size comparable to if we had an in-person symposium. So we're not really losing on our audience. And then the challenges or the cons are maybe the occasional technical issue, as well as it's not really quite the same, the virtual format. Maybe it's not as engaging in some ways as the in-person presentation. That's not the same type of interaction. But moving forward, as I said, we really hope that we can establish the campus learning community, or the CLC, as a college-wide entity, so that we include all 8 campuses on a regular basis. And so we'll probably be continuing to explore virtual participation, because that really facilitates having this college-wide interaction, as well as establishing the campus learning community, again, as a framework for the integration of high-impact pedagogies, such as project-based learning. And so at this point, I'd be glad to take any questions. I have my contact information up, and anybody in the audience is also welcome to contact me or to check out our website, earthethicsinstitute.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation, and I encourage all audience members to please post your questions in the Q&A box. To start us off, we have a question from Natalie Fowler. Do you at this time or in the future plan to collaborate with internationalization efforts on campus?
So kind of like international learning.
I think that study abroad or ISSS, yeah.
Yeah, that we would like to collaborate with that type of thing. At Earth Ethics Institute, we do actually collaborate with the study abroad. We have a class that focuses on Earth literacy that is at times offered as a study abroad in places like Iceland or Costa Rica. And so it would be great to explore how the campus learning community might expand to that type of a format.
Great, thanks for that. I was also wondering, how do you measure impact and how do you evaluate success of your programs?
So a big part of our assessment is looking at audience participation and faculty participation, and we're constantly trying to grow that. But we have also used different surveys that maybe look at more of the qualitative experience. And I mentioned Sensor. They have a survey that was actually developed by the University of Wisconsin, but it's the Student Assessment of Learning Gains that looks at students' reactions to pedagogy in the classroom, especially if they're using things like project-based learning and or academic service learning, and it gives you feedback from the students on what they felt of the teaching, and we've kind of been able to customize that to the campus learning community and use that for feedback from students as well.
Oh, great, thanks for that. So, all right, you talked about some of the lessons learned and the pros and the cons of adapting to a virtual environment. I imagine that's on everyone's minds. I know it's on my mind right now. So can you talk us through a little bit more about what are you going to be really glad to say goodbye to as things begin to move back into being able to do more in person? And what are you going to take, like what are these pros? How will you integrate some of that more into your ongoing work?
Yeah, as I was saying, I think that it's a great opportunity to reach more people across all 8 of our campuses, which are spread all around the city, but also maybe community members as well, because if you have the link, you can join on the different presentations. And so I think that we definitely want to keep that virtual aspect, even if we're in person and having a presentation, in an auditorium on campus, that will also have that virtual component to it. And how that'll work, it has yet to be determined. We have to actually do it and work out the kinks, but I kind of envision us going in that direction where it's kind of a hybrid of in-person and virtual.
Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And we'll have more time at the end to continue the discussion. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And for our final panelists today, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce our very own Swarthmore College community members and community partners. So we have Giovanna De Ciro, Zuleen Mayfield, Ananya Bhattacharya, and Chantal Reyes. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Aurora. And I also want to thank Ben and Katie and Nimesh from the Lang Center Program on Engaged Scholarship for inviting us. I'm thrilled to be here today on this panel together with Zuleen Mayfield, an amazing environmental justice activist and longstanding community partner with Swarthmore students and faculty, and then also with 2 of my extraordinary environmental studies students, Ananya Bhattacharya and Chantal Reyes, who have both dedicated their studies to supporting the goals of environmental justice in our region and beyond. So today we want to share some of the work that we've been doing together and to emphasize, I think, the importance of working in collaboration with our neighboring communities to advance racial, economic, and environmental justice in the place where we live. So I teach a course here on environmental justice at Swarthmore College. And in this course, students learn about the theories and practices of the environmental justice movement, about how communities of color across the country and the world have organized and risen up to fight against the long history and ongoing structures of environmental racism that have put the health of their communities and their futures at risk. And so one of the core principles of the environmental justice movement is that our environment is not something that is far away and separate from us, an abstracted concept that we study in books or that we only study in books, but the environment is about place. The places where we live, work, play, go to school, plant community gardens. And it's about the communities with whom we share these places on the planet. So thanks to Aurora, who opened our panel today, acknowledging that here at Swarthmore, we are standing on the unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape peoples. And we need to ask, really from an environmental justice perspective, what kinds of responsibilities does that acknowledgement ask of us and present to us? And what does it mean to be accountable to the peoples, communities, and lands on which we live, work, play, and study? So let me just share this screen. So this principle of focusing on the acknowledgement of place and community that has been so central to environmental justice, to the environmental justice movement, and to activists like Zelene, has really instilled in me as a teacher the importance of embracing what I would call a pedagogy of engagement in my courses. And I really do aim to create opportunities for students to meet with, learn from, and collaborate with community leaders, environmental justice leaders, and organizations in the local area. So even during the COVID-19 pandemic, you can see here a screenshot with where Zelene came to speak to and share some of her ideas and concerns with my students. We were, the course was taught virtually on Zoom, and we would normally have taken field trips and gone and met with and worked with local community residents, but we were able to bring some forms of engagement and understanding of place to the classroom. So again, here Zelene will talk about some of her responses to working with our class in a moment, but here she's talking about how students can get involved in the ongoing issues of environmental racism that her community is experiencing in nearby Chester, Pennsylvania. So in this course, which was held during the January term a couple of months ago, students were able to tangibly understand that environmental injustice is not just an abstract theory that we're reading in class, but an ongoing system that directly affects people's lives and including their own lives. So Zelene Mayfield is the founder of Chester Residents Concerned for Quality Living, which is also known as CIRCLE. And it's one of the beloved community organizations that my students and I have partnered with, as have many students and faculty from Swarthmore College and other colleges and universities over the years. Chester's a small city that's located along the Delaware River, about 15 miles south of Philadelphia and about 4 miles east of Swarthmore College. It has a population of about 34,000, of which approximately 70% are African-American residents. CIRCLE was founded by Zelene and other residents in Chester in 1992 to raise awareness about the history of environmental racism in the city, which has led to the disproportionately high rates of asthma, respiratory diseases, different forms of cancer, and other environmental illnesses that residents have suffered for decades. So Circle has been leading a close to 30-year fight to demand an end to their community being targeted as the hub for waste incineration and waste management in the region. Chester houses the largest trash incinerator in the United States, burning up to 3,500 tons of trash per day. It hosts a sewage waste treatment facility and sludge incinerator, several chemical manufacturing plants, a paper manufacturing plant, an oil refinery, and other polluting industries. So environmental justice organizations like Circle and many others have for many years successfully raised awareness of the different forms of exploitation and unsustainability of our dominant systems of production that have been built upon extraction and waste. My students learn about these struggles and the accomplishments of activists like Zulene, and it fires them up to want to connect their academic studies with active community engagement, to support the movement for environmental justice, and to advocate for more just approaches to sustainability, such as, for example, advocating for zero waste initiatives in their own colleges and hometowns. This is something that Ananya and Chantal will talk about in a moment. So one of the central messages about community engagement around environmental justice issues that Zulene has conveyed really persuasively to me and my students is that pollution needs to be seen and understood as a problem that affects us all. Polluted air does not respect township or city boundaries. So while the residents of an environmental justice community like Chester may be breathing and may be exposed to the highest levels of harmful emissions, such as particulate matter, dioxins, lead, and other compounds from local facilities, the residents of the leafy arboretum of nearby Swarthmore College should not feel that they are out of harm's way. This is a very key message that we've learned through our collaborations with Zulene and Circle. And again, it's a central message in the environmental justice movement that a toxic, unsustainable system affects us all. We can't continue to pretend that we can separate or create a firewall between the harmful waste products we are producing and our comfortable lives. Yes, the marginalized communities like Chester are the canaries in the coal mine, and they are affected first, but we all ultimately breathe the same air. Again, the important message that's translated through our community engagements. So the message that Zulene, again, has been teaching my students, she's been promoting for decades to hordes of young people and college students in the area. Students from Swarthmore College and many other local universities have over the years responded to this call to work for environmental justice. And they've been inspired by the idea that we are all connected. And so we need to work together. So in response, students from many different colleges and universities in this region formed what's known as the Campus Coalition Concerning Chester, also known as C4, in the early 90s. And I think that C4 represents engaged scholarship and advocacy at its best. And that is, it encourages students to understand and to engage with their environmental studies coursework as though they are a part of and living in a place, and that they are connected to the communities with whom they share these places. So I want to invite Zulene, turn the floor over to Zulene and ask her to share with us some of her thoughts about why she thinks it's been important for communities in Chester and for Circle to work with colleges and to work with students in colleges and universities over the years, and why C4 has been so important to the ongoing struggle for environmental justice. So Zulene.
Okay. Somebody got to start me. I don't know how to do this. Oh, well, no. It said the host has disabled it. Somebody's got to fix it.
And are you trying to turn your video on?
I got it now. The host had to
Oh, there
release
you are.
it. Hey,
Awesome.
everybody. Hey,
Awesome.
girls. Hey, there go my girls. Hello, everybody. And as previously said, my name is Lee Mayfield, and I'm the chairperson of Chester Residents Concerned for Quality Living in little old Chester, Pennsylvania, not far from Swarthmore College. First, I'm going to give you a very, very brief history on why I have a fond warmness for Swarthmore College. Many, 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 many years ago, Swarthmore College students would come to the city of Chester to my church and actually tutored us in math and English on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that was my first introduction of what a college student was. So I have very fond memories of that, and they were actually from Swarthmore College. Fast forward many years ahead, we found ourselves as a community with a tremendous problem. They told us that they were bringing a trash to steam facility to our community. We weren't quite sure what it was. We had one local library, and of course, when you went there, there was no referenced material or anything on that type of technology. When we discovered that it was an incinerator, there was one book at our local library that actually mentioned a couple of chapters on incineration. Fast forward, we needed help. We needed help, and we needed access to information. At the time, our local library, you had to put in an advance notice 1 week in advance for internet time. You got 1 hour a week. So we were truly ill-equipped as far as technology, as far as a huge disparity as far as information, and also for the science. Fast forward again, we have resources all around our city. Even though we're a very poor city, we have some of the most wealthiest communities all around that surround the city of Chester. So we reached out to Swarthmore College to see what technical assistance or what help we could get. And I happened to go at a time where they were doing like divvying up their community and service. So I went and I spoke to the faculty, and they said, well, can you come and speak to our new students? And that's what I did. Out of speaking to the new students, there's always a lot of apprehensiveness on the part of students and communities. This is, it has to be a trust that the students are not coming into the community to tell the community what to do, and a partnership for the community to not tell the students what to do. It has to be a very respectful balance. They have as much knowledge as any community person, and any community person will rival any professor at Swarthmore College or any other university or college. I always tell the students and my students that, yes, they teach you what you need to know in practical terms and theories, and I'm going to show you what really happens in experience and actualities, what happens on the streets. What they teach you in school is one thing. What I'm going to teach you is going to be life skills for your life. And we're going to have to respect each other and understand that we're equal partners. So out of that, we held a conference, or it was really a call to arms. And we invited college campuses. I think there were probably about 30 that we had invited to come to Swarthmore College. Swarthmore College was our host and our hub. And we held a weekend conference, and we asked the students what they could do to help us defeat this incinerator and other waste facilities in the city of Chester. And we kind of let the forum just flow. And out of that, the students formed Campus Coalition Concerning Chester. At the height of Campus Coalition, or Concerning Chester, or C4, it involved 17 different college campuses. Their only mission statement was to assist Chester residents concerned for quality living with whatever. And that was their whole mission statement. But what it gave us was the ability to do research. It gave us an insight to advanced technical processes. They taught us about pollutants. They taught us about the technologies that we were facing and had to overcome. And
Zulene, are you muted? I don't think we can hear you. Oh, there it is.
You don't tell me I've been talking that whole time and I
No,
was
no, no,
muted.
no, no. Just briefly.
Oh, okay. This is about to be a problem, Giovanna. So currently where we are now, this has been a long battle. But don't cry for us, cry for the incinerator today. Don't cry for us, Argentina, because we're fierce. We're going to shut this thing down. We've shut down many other polluting facilities in the city of Chester. And we've done it with a true partnership of students who have taken the lead on a lot of the research capabilities that we needed done. Their help has been invaluable to free up a community group that has no budget, has no office, has no. We're definitely the David in the battle of David and Goliath. However, worry about those people. We're okay, but the partnerships over the years that I've had with students have been lifelong friendships, and we've had students that have been with us the whole 4 years that they've been at Swarthmore College. One has went on to become the council person in Minnesota, and one is actually on the board of a funder. But we are in contact with these people constantly. So, and I have one student who's still with me. He's not a student anymore. He got out of school and became a lawyer. But not the partnerships that community groups, when they are true partnerships, they are a give and a take, and we learn both ways. The students learn from us, and we definitely learn from the students. One of the constraints that we do have is that we know that we have them for a short period of time. And that's not really a problem. If the students are dedicated, I'll tell any student every time I meet them, if you dedicate an hour to me, I want my hour. If you say, I want to help, but I only have 3 hours a semester, I demand my 3 hours. You're not going to shorten it. But at the same time, I'm giving you my time. I will field your questions. There is no question that I feel as though it's stupid. I don't allow that to happen. But these students at Swarthmore College, they've been instrumental in getting a resolution passed in their community, because that is their community, whether it's temporary. They pay money to go to that school, good money, and they have a voice, and they should have a voice at their local government as to what they are exposed to and what impact they are supposed to have for their environment. They come from all over, but when they look into their communities, there's a Chester that's in their community. Yeah. And there are issues that are the same that must be dealt with. And hopefully, what they learn from Circle, they can go back and magnify it and replicate it in their community, just to take a stand. All right, questions?
Thanks, Zulene. So let's hear from the two of these incredible students, and then we'll gather together for questions afterwards. So I'm going to share So the screen, Ananya and Chantal, I'll share your slides here. Let me get to your slides.
Great, thank
Is
you.
this your first slide?
Yes, it is. Yeah, hi everyone. So we'll be talking about student engagement with environmental justice, both on and off campus. I'm Ananya Bhattacharya. I'm a senior at Swarthmore.
Hi everyone, thank you for having us. My name is Chantal and I'm a junior at Swarthmore.
So we were both in Professor DeKiro's environmental justice course during the January term, and we learned about environmental justice through the lens of multiple recurring themes. And so just to talk a little bit about our campus, I'll talk a little bit about the themes we identified in the course. So the first major theme was binary thinking. This describes how we tend to see ourselves and our modern lifestyles as inherently separate from nature and wilderness. So for example, how does the mainstream environmental movement talk about parks and conservation versus how does it often fail to discuss pollution and justice? And how does our nature-based language obscure environmental injustices that are related to urban environments? This concept also relates to colonial nature talk, which is a product of imperialism and settler colonialism and reinforces similar binaries. The next theme that we discussed was history and geography. So the harmfulness of slow violence or violence enacted over long temporal scales. So we discussed how pollution and contamination aren't instantly lethal and aren't always thought of as traditional violence, but they are violence enacted over long periods of time. Then we talked about breathing, especially in the wake of last summer and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the phrase, "I can't breathe." We explored some of the other ways in which BIPOC communities are robbed of their rights to breathe. How can communities breathe without a fundamental access to clean air? And our last theme for the course was repair, remediate, regenerate, and reimagine. So we explored various ways in which communities in sacrifice zones have been reimagining the systems that we had discussed throughout the course. And we thought ourselves about how we can repair and regenerate our communities and look forward. And the last part of the class that I would like to talk about is Zuline's visit that Giovanna has already spoken about. And I just really remember one line that Zuline said was that we all have a dog in this fight. We all stand to lose something from continued incineration in Chester. We all breathe the same air. Environmental injustices are local, but they also transcend so many boundaries. And Zuline's visit really deeply impacted our class and forged a lot of ties between us, even over Zoom, and kickstarted student organization in C4, which Chantal will talk about now.
Thanks, Ananya. Yeah, as Zuline said, supporting Circle is G4's main goal and working towards this right to breathe. As Ananya said, these are action-oriented methods of regenerating, repairing, remediating, and reimagining our society and waste systems. C4 in its height spanned 5 states to help achieve environmental justice. Over the years, they have lobbied city officials to block proposals for new industrial facilities and even aided in the passing of a zoning measure that prevented additional waste management facilities from entering Chester. Our main goals this year, as it is a lot of virtual working and activism, includes fundraising, campaigning on social media, and phone banking to the DCSWA to reject the renewal of a contract with Covanta, the incinerator. Our other goal is also just trying to rebuild the coalition and try to attract as many campuses as possible. However, 2 major stepping stones in our virtual activism is that of the Swarthmore Borough Council passing the Zero Waste Resolution with the help of Swarthmore Professor Jennifer Fluer, which shows political support for Circle, as well as a possible public hearing from the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority on the contract renewal, which I actually think is in part from some of our phone banking. And so I'm going to leave you with a few links in this chat. The first is to donate. Please donate directly to Circle, and you can check out the website for Chester residents. Sign the petition if you're in the Delaware County to show support for Circle and ban the incineration, as well as our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Giovanna, Ananya, Chantal, and Zuline so much for that inspiring presentation. I want to go ahead and invite, since we are reaching towards the end of our time together, I want to invite all of the panelists to join us for Q&A. If so, any of the audience members, if you have questions for either our Swarthmore and Chester partners or for any of the previous panelists, feel free to put your questions into the Q&A feature. We do have one question which is specific to Swarthmore College, and I'll direct this one to you, Giovanna. What percentage of people from Chester attend Swarthmore College?
That is a really, really, really important and good question, and it's not a very uplifting answer. Not very many whatsoever. I have a student, the last student I've had from Chester graduated 4 years ago. And an environmental studies student. There have been a couple of others in the last few years, but I don't think we have any students currently from Chester. So that sort of pipeline, that educational pipeline, is one that needs to be strengthened.
So for maybe for each of the, if each of the those of us on the panel who presented today could share some takeaway message, if for those attending who are here, what would be the most important if they're trying to work on this kind of partnership, community engagement around environmental justice? What would be a lesson learned to try to implement these kinds of programs on their own campuses? That you would say, if you take away one thing from this presentation today, what would you hope would be a takeaway? And maybe we could start with Elizabeth from Duke. Start with our first presenters, Elizabeth and Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much to the other presenters too. I learned so much, so I really appreciate the opportunity to learn from y'all. I would just echo what Ms. Mayfield said. If you are engaging with communities, especially in those in your immediate environs of whatever your campus that might represent for your campus, respect is really high on the list. Respecting the types of knowledge and the skills and the lived experience that people bring is absolutely the fundamentals of engagement, I think, and doing so in a way that's effective, productive, and equitable for everyone involved. And also from Ms. Mayfield, I would say, if you make the commitments that you're making very clear on both sides. If you say you're going to show up for 5 hours, show up for 5 hours. And if you can put it in writing, even better. But if it's just a verbal agreement, that's okay. But Ms. Mayfield, I really appreciated all that you had to say, and I think that wisdom is true for every type of engagement across communities and campuses. So thank you.
And just being aware that we probably have that's perfect timing. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Being aware that we have a very short amount of time. So Catherine, do you have any quick closing thoughts for us?
I'll just add that in addition to respect, I think it takes a lot of time to build the relationships that you need in order to have a functioning partnership. And often we underestimate that amount of time that it takes to really build trust. So that's a critical factor in community engaged scholarship.
Thank you. Michael?
I was going to add the importance of not only respect, but co-creation, whether you're working with faculty or community stakeholders, that you're not just going to say, here, I'm going to solve your problems, but let's work together to figure out, what the issues are and how we can work together to solve them, so that they're a part of the process from the very beginning.
Chantal?
I would say to please donate and check out the website and the link. There's a lot of meetings you can get involved. There's a circle meeting tonight that you can show up to. And I feel like the ball is really rolling right now. So I really appreciate having the time to speak today and getting to hear from Zulene and everyone else. So thank you so much for your time.
Perfect, thanks. Ananya?
I'll just echo what Chantal just said, but also what everyone has been saying about relationship building. I think that's so important.
Thank you. Giovanna.
I think I would just say that despite the language that we live in a bubble in our institutions of higher education, it's not the case, and these kinds of collaborations and partnerships really reveal that. So it's such an important part of my work here, and I think for our students as well.
Thank you. Ben, I see that you've been able to join us. I know you were teaching for part of the time. I'm so glad you're here. Do you want to add to that?
For all of the time. I just got done with Rousseau on the environment too. So no, I have nothing to add except great admiration for what's being done here. Professor DeCiro, Zuline, they're just tremendous work. It's super important. Everything the students have said as well. The co-creation, the equal voices, I couldn't have said it better myself, and I appreciate what you're doing.
I think that I'll say that the students have been continue to be one of the most important voices in helping us move us forward, and helping me learn and grow and think about how to advance the college and the institution in our own thinking, in my own thinking, and that disproportionately the administration will listen to the students, but it's that partnership between everyone working together where I think we can get the most work done. So Zuline, over to you. Will you give us some closing thoughts? And if you would unmute yourself.
Okay. All righty, there I go. I'm getting there. Anyway, the last word. This is what I would like to say to everybody involved. Professors, you have a critical role in defining these young, great minds. Look around you, look into your communities that surround your little bubble, because believe you me, there's a Chester not too far away from your campus. Number two, to the students that come, and the faculty who directs them that way, you're not our cavalry. We are the cavalry, but you are a supporting cast. You are members that strengthen our cavalry. You have a wealth of knowledge that we're locked out of. I tell everybody, Chester, it's 501 school systems in the state of Pennsylvania. Chester either is at 501 or 50 or 500. So truly the educational disparity couldn't be any more obvious between Chester and Swarthmore College. However, I can teach you things that your professor has no knowledge of. They have a book knowledge, but you come to Chester, you're gonna learn life. And when you come with a pure heart. Don't worry about whatever questions you ask or being apprehensive, because people generally tend to have a BS monitor. We can understand when you're there to use us or to help us. We will take the help. I will not accept a usury. And right about now, a lot of academics or academia are looking for cases like Chester, so that they can fill out a grant and say that they're working on environmental justice issues, and they prostitute communities like Chester. It won't happen in Chester, because Chester has me, and I will run them out of Chester with that foolishness. We need boots on the ground. You ain't got to be on the ground. You can sit at a screen, and these two young ladies have been pulling information that I would never, ever, ever have the time or even know where to look for, such as financial data, other data that we need that give us the tools to effectively fight back. That's priceless, priceless. And we are so appreciative. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Zuline. Thank you to all of our panelists. And thank you so much to the Lang Center, to to Ben Berger and to all of the staff at the Lang Center for putting on this event. It's been a pleasure and an honor to participate in it. And thank you to all of the attendees for being here. With that, we will close.
See you later tonight, girls. I'm out of here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.